Ever wish superheroes were real? We do too. With those wacky costumes and amazing powers, being a superhero has been the dream for millions of people around the world. But what happens when those heroes break their own rules? Nothing good, that's for sure. Chaos and sadness are often the price to pay when a hero decides to go too far, and it makes us a little relieved that they don't exist in real life. But first, don't forget to like this video and hit the subscribe button to get more awesome content from Screen Rant every day. And can you guess the superhero film based off of these emojis? Stay tuned at the end to find out.
I'm just ahead of the curve.
Batman. We're pretty familiar with Batman and his rule. It was a driving point in the hit 2008 film The Dark Knight, in which Heath Ledger's Joker constantly tried to get the Caped Crusader to break his one rule: to kill the villain and bring bats down to the same level that the villains of Gotham are at. Joker fails to do this, and Batman continues to be a model citizen in The Dark Knight Rises, but things were a little different in the comics. In the critically acclaimed entry, The Killing Joke, the clown prince of crime himself may have finally pushed Batman over the edge. In a twisted move, Joker ends up doing some horrible things to the Gordon family, which sends Bruce Wayne to a dark place that he's never gone before. The Alan Moore comic puts Batman in a position where he willingly offers to help the Joker, saying that they don't have to do this anymore. Joker denies and gives Batman one final joke: the Killing Joke. Batman ends up laughing along with his arch nemesis in a fit of hysterics before appearing to actually put an end to the Joker once and for all. Daredevil. Much like Batman, Daredevil operates under one simple rule: no killing. It doesn't matter how evil or depraved the villain is, the devil of Hell's Kitchen just wants justice. He is a lawyer after all. That all changed though once his arch nemesis Bullseye went too far for the devil. Bullseye has repeatedly tortured and damaged Matt. He's killed many people who were close to him, including Elektra and Karen Page. Elektra fortunately got brought back to life, but the same couldn't be said for Karen, sadly. Both incidents left Matt incredibly wounded, and once Bullseye went on a rampage, Daredevil decided he had enough blood on his hands and ultimately took out his nemesis in a similar fashion to how Elektra initially met her fate: impalement. It's a huge line to cross, not only because Matt, the defender of truth and justice, stepped over the line, but that he did it in such a fashion that it echoed the death of his former lover. There's something pretty messed up with that, to be honest. In true comic book fashion though, Bullseye survived in the end, but the intent was still there for the man without fear.
Look, I'm here to help, but it has to be on my own terms.
Superman. We're all very familiar with the infamous neck-snapping scene from Zack Snyder's Man of Steel film. Left without any more options, Superman himself decided the only way to save the lives of innocents was to take out General Zod permanently. Fans were not happy about this, but this actually wasn't the first time Supes has broken his cardinal rule. Back in 1988, Superman was brought to another dimension with the help of Supergirl in the comic book Superman number 22. It was here that the Man of Steel got to have his showdown with Zod and his minions after they went on a terrible spree. This resulted in the loss of all life on Earth. Talk about going too far. Superman was having none of it, and got to work on Zod and his squad. Weakened by golden kryptonite, Superman surprised many when he decided to ice General and his goons with the use of green kryptonite, which Superman is thankfully and conveniently immune to in this universe. The act is pretty unforgivable, even for Supes, and many years later, Spectre would come knocking, looking to punish the Golden Boy for his sins. Just because it takes place in another universe doesn't mean it didn't happen. Words to live by. Wonder Woman. As we wait for Wonder Woman to charge into theaters and kick all kinds of booty, we couldn't help but wonder if this tough-as-nails member of the Justice League ever got her hands too dirty. While she may not be doing any terrible deeds in her debut film, which will see Gal Gadot returning to play the Amazonian warrior, Wonder Woman actually isn't as squeaky clean as we were initially led to believe. Like Superman, Diana Prince is pretty adamant about not taking lives. Her super strength and magical tools allow her to do the job to the best of her abilities without any collateral damage, except for that one time where she intentionally took a life to save the world. In the comic book Wonder Woman 219, Maxwell Lord ends up taking control of Superman's mind and causing some extreme carnage all around on command. With the help of her lasso, which forces people to tell the truth, she learned that the only way to free her friend and fellow Justice League member was to take out Maxwell Lord, something that Diana did and ultimately caused some friction between her, Supes, and Batman.
No honor among thieves, eh?
The Flash. Unlike most superheroes, whose singular role is simply to never take a life, Flash has another rule that makes him stand out more over the rest of those superheroes. Thanks to his super speed, the Flash can literally run back in time in order to get a better understanding of certain events and even warn himself about things to come. It's quite the power, but it also has the potential to be devastating. If Barry intentionally goes back in time and changes things, there could be dire consequences for everyone around him and by association, everyone they know. Butterfly effect in action. Barry inevitably breaks this rule and goes back in time in both the comics and the hit CW show to save his mother and creates an alternate timeline known as Flashpoint. Barry may have saved his mother, but everything else is pretty terrible. The comics see the Justice League members doing some pretty horrid things, such as Aquaman drowning parts of Western Europe and Wonder Woman and her Amazonians conquering the British Isles, while the show brought Savitar into the mix. And when he tried to return things back to normal, he created yet another timeline. Green Lantern. We'll have to wait a few more years to see if Green Lantern will become our new favorite DC hero when he flies into cinemas in the DCEU. But for now, we can look back on his comic book history at all the great moments Hal Jordan has had and one not-so-great moment. You'd think if he had a magical ring that can turn your imagination into a weapon, you'd be able to think of some amazing ways to get your enemies without causing any light to go out forever. Normally, you'd be right, as Hal Jordan, like most superheroes, is all about that sweet, sweet justice. But there was one time in the comic where Hal went too far and actually went on a killing spree. Yikes! Back in the 90s, during the Emerald Twilight arc, Hal finally snapped when the alien known as Mogul and cyborg Superman destroyed his hometown of Coast City. What followed was an attempt to bring the town back, which resulted in the loss of many lanterns, his friend Kilowog, sworn enemy Sinestro, and even the Guardians, while also destroying all the lantern rings in the galaxy. Overkill much? DC later revised this to being a parasite controlling Hal, but when it first came out, Hal was anything but heroic. Wolverine. This one's not so much a rule as it is a simple common sense and something you just don't do no matter what the situation is.
These two.
Not okay.
Wolverine has always been a troubled individual. Whether it's his memory loss or the fact that he's constantly surrounded by death, he's never had it easy. Things got even harder for him during the Uncanny X-Men series, which saw Logan actually take the life of his own son. We're glad this never made its way to the big screen, as that sounds much too sad to witness. Wolverine's son, Daken, was leading the Brotherhood of Evil and perhaps due to feeling a bit abandoned by his father, threatened to wipe out the entire X-School that his old man set up. Talk about being put between a rock and a hard place. The two men engaged in a battle for the ages, but in the end, Wolverine had to make use of a puddle to ensure his son would never harm anyone ever again. It's a painful moment to witness, especially when you consider Wolverine's past, and adding this scar to his collection of past traumas is awful for both the reader and for Wolverine. The Punisher. Unlike most heroes who strive on preserving life, Frank Castle is champion at making sure his enemies never get up again. All members of the criminal underworld have learned to fear him, as they know they'll receive no mercy from the Punisher himself. A man with a particular set of skills who will make your life a living hell. But criminals shouldn't be the only ones to be afraid. In an alternate universe printing, Frank Castle actually ends up turning on the entire Marvel roster. He turns his weapons on heroes and villains alike and blames all those with powers and costumes for the death of his family, who died when the Avengers and the X-Men got into a battle with aliens in New York. Blinded by rage and a sense of vengeance, Castle decides to take out everyone in the Marvel Universe, from Daredevil to Wolverine to Captain America. You know, he probably should have talked it over to find some answers instead. Talk about going overboard. Going after the ones personally responsible is typical Frank, but going after everyone goes against everything the character would normally stand for. Perhaps that's why he felt so guilty at the end and decided taking himself out was the only step left to take. It's a pretty grim thought. Batman. Again! For someone who lives by his rules, Batman seems to break it quite a bit. When he's not mowing down goons in Batman v Superman, the Dark Knight could be found making some morally ambiguous choices in the comics. Specifically, when it came to confronting the big, bad Darkseid. We know we'll be seeing Darkseid at some point on the big screen, likely in Justice League 2, so it'll be interesting to see if Batman follows a similar arc as to what happens in the comics. Darkseid is one bad dude. He's like Thanos for the Avengers, so it's not unreasonable to see why Batman would want to terminate the problem permanently. In Final Crisis number 6, Batman makes the judgment call where the threat of Darkseid being alive is too great and ends up shooting him with a special bullet that can kill gods. We're not making this up. Batman missed his mark though, hitting Darkseid in the shoulder, and claimed he had bad aim as using firearms isn't something he's totally used to. It gets weirder when we learned Batman was actually on a time-traveling quest to stop Darkseid, and the event was later revised to this particular Batman being a rogue clone that Darkseid created. That's a mouthful.
I just want to say I really like what you do. I think it's great.
Thanks.
Spider-Man. Spider-Man is one of Marvel's most popular characters. He has been a mainstay since the 60s, and he's been featured in countless comics, animated shows, and portrayed by 3 different actors in Hollywood. All around, Spidey's a pretty chill dude. The kind of person you can likely hang out with during school or at a superhero cafe. You know, except for that one time though. Like most heroes, Spider-Man operates under a no-kill rule, preferring to immobilize his foes and wait for the local authorities to lock them up for good. But in an unusual arc from Marvel titled The Other, Spider-Man actually breaks his own rule when Mary Jane's life was in danger. In this arc, Marvel suggested Spidey's powers were actually magical and not caused by the radioactive spider. So when he ended up fighting against the vampire known as Morlun, Spidey ends up transforming into a deranged creature that's half spider and takes Morlun out in truly brutal fashion. Spider-Man died himself shortly after, but both he and Morlun were quickly resurrected in typical comic book fashion. We wonder if Parker will perhaps cross the line in his upcoming movie Homecoming. Do you think it's acceptable for a superhero to break their own rules, or does that make them just as terrible as the villains? Let us know what you think in the comments below, and be sure to subscribe to our channel to stay up to date with all things Screen Rant. Oh yeah, and the answer to the emoji trivia question is...